moments ago,
Okay.
and if you want to text them just so that there's a possibility of getting one or two more, that'd be
Okay.
fine.
All right. Let me, yeah, because Mike, oh wait, let me do it the other way.
He's coming from the city. The weather's terrible.
Oh, and the traffic, I came from Newark and I got here 10 minutes before this call. So I was
Yes.
just fortunate enough to get here in time.
Yeah, it's not so hot outside.
No.
At least it's not snow.
Yeah. And supposedly it's going to clear out by tomorrow afternoon, and we're going to have a
Yes, and Thanksgiving will be nice. Yes. Yes. Daniel, who was supposed to join? Do you need me to text somebody?
I couldn't did Susan say she was going to join or not?
I don't know. I can text her if you wish. I haven't talked to her all day.
I'm putting her on this text here.
Okay.
Um,
I know Kathy will not.
Kathy will not. Okay, let me take her off.
Yeah.
That then. Um,
Kathy, I'm a little familiar with New Providence in that I served on the board of the Sharing Network for
Okay.
quite a few years, based there on Center Street or Center Road.
Yep.
And
Central Avenue.
Central Avenue, right?
Yes.
so
yeah.
how did somebody from Princeton get on the Sharing Network in New Providence?
Well, the Network is a statewide organization, and the CEO, the long-term CEO, Joe Roth, and I had run into each other many years ago when I was in government, and he was with, I think it was Sharing Plow, a pharmaceutical company, and then he ended up at the Sharing Network, and we would run into each other pretty frequently. And about, I guess, 2010 or 11, he reached out to me and wanted someone with a business background and governmental background to see if I'd be interested in going on the board. At that time, I just started as the executive director of the state housing and mortgage finance agency, and I deferred. I said, I'm undertaking a new project now. I'm not sure what my time constraints will be. So I deferred, but he came back 2 years later and recruited me, and I served on the board for the maximum amount of time, the last few years as the president of the board. I'm technically the ex-president. I sit on the executive committee, and I'm still connected through they have an overall group called the management company, and I'm still on that. So delighted. It was a great organization. It is a great organization, organ transplant.
Yeah.
And
very much so.
I've been involved with a lot of nonprofits, but this is the one that when you hear the stories that have happened, and the stories of not the recipients so much as the people who have loved ones that were lost and they donated their organ. They were the most committed to the organization by far. And it's just amazing stuff, amazing stuff. So that's how I've done the walk through New Providence several times, and they have a 5K down in Long Branch, and now the next town over from Long Branch. So it's been about 10 years I was involved, and still am technically still involved. I'll be there. In fact, in about a week and a half, they're going to have a holiday reception for staff and board. So I'll be there.
So you'll probably drive right by us. We're on South Street there. So
you're on South Street? Oh, I know that. Okay.
yeah, so
Maybe
coming
I'll take it. I'll make it my business to drive by.
Yeah, if you're coming,
I
well,
usually take 78 going across.
yeah, yeah, you'll you'll actually come probably right, you're coming from Princeton, you'll come right by where I live. I live in Branchburg.
Okay,
So I take 287 to 78 on up to
right.
Providence and then get off the exit there. And yeah, you'll drive right by St. Andrews. So
Okay,
Mike Barry has joined us. Mike is the senior warden. I was explaining to you the officers and everything. So Mike is the senior warden.
Yeah, hi, how are
hi,
you?
that's
Sorry, I'm
Tony
late.
Marchetta, nice to meet you.
Ran up the train. Got a little, got a little wet.
Were you working in the city today?
I was, yeah.
I did that for 10 years. But I had what a lot of people referred to as half of a commute. My office was at one pen, and I could take the train from Princeton Junction and never go outside from there on.
Yeah, that's a nice spot.
Yeah.
You've got that commute, yeah.
Okay, well, in the interest of getting us going, so let me. You both now have met Anthony or Tony. As
Tony.
he introduced himself. He's the principal with ALM Consulting down in.
I am ALM Consulting.
You
My
are
son,
ALM Consulting.
my son also helps out. He's Lou, and he's also in the arena of real estate development. So he helps out every now and then.
Right. I got Tony's name from the website for the Affordable Housing Professionals of New Jersey, and he's listed as one of the consultants there. And he has been very helpful in getting back to me a couple of times when I had questions about things. And I'm very appreciative of him coming on this Tuesday before Thanksgiving to just maybe give us some ideas about things. I sent him our feasibility study, so he has been able to look at that. And then Mike and I and a couple of others were on a program last week with Trinity Church Wall Street, who helped fund our feasibility study and helping us move forward with this. So as Trinity would define it, we're still in the early stages of this, but they have shared with me that they do believe that we're ready to move into the pre-development phase, and that we'll probably want to soon begin to talk about real estate advisors or consultants, development advisors, someone like that to walk us through. It just so happens I had already reached out to you and had set up this conversation prior to them explaining that. So our objective is we do want to build affordable housing. We know we probably can't do all affordable housing and achieve everything that we want to do. So with that, we're now just trying to begin to figure out how do we put this together so that it works, so that we can move forward and it'll actually work for us to achieve the objectives that we want. We want something that is consistent with our mission, which is the affordable, but we also want some annuity type of income, which will probably be some market rate housing on the property as well. We currently do provide, I think I've mentioned this to you, we currently have 3 units on our property, on our campus right now that we just kind of started on our own. We had a school during the pandemic. We closed the school. The school used a house on the property and we renovated that house and we have a family there. It's below market rate. And so, that generates some income for us, but it also is mission because it's below market rate for a family to keep them in New Providence. We have a carriage house that has 2 apartments in it. And those are leased to Family Promise, if you know about Family Promise. So Family Promise works, they're in 35 to 40 states around the country. And they work to keep families from falling through the cracks and becoming homeless. And they actually started in Summit or Madison, New Jersey, and that's where their national headquarters is.
Wow.
But we're working with Family Promise of Union County, and they placed 2 families with us in these apartments. They asked us this fall if we would convert one of them. So one of the residents, she's a single mom with a daughter. The other one's a single dad with a son on the spectrum. And they asked us to convert her apartment to Section 8. So we have agreed to do that. And at some point, we've been told by, that we're approved. And so at some point, they will actually begin to pick up the rent for her. In fact, she will pay nothing. She's not going to be paying anything. So we're kind of having experience with now 3 different types, if you will, but we're novices at this. We know nothing about moving forward and what we need to do. So Jackie, Mike, does that fairly characterize where we are in the process?
Yep, very much so.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And not Tony, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the feasibility study, but they're towards the back. They sort of put together different scenarios that are possibilities in terms of development, and then they put some numbers to what the costs are and the value created. And obviously, you can see it's a tough time right now with interest rates and what their estimates are of hard and soft costs. There's a pretty significant value gap deficiency there. But part of that whole picture is the incentive programs that are available for a development involving low-income housing. So as a part of this discussion, understanding what the major benefits are would be really helpful for us to start to understand, how does that gap get closed?
Well, I think one of the early questions you need to understand is that making significant money doing affordable housing is possible, but it's possible if you're in it for the very long term. So if that's something that you're willing to do, for example, Stephen Ross of the Related Company started off developing affordable housing. And he's a multi-billionaire now. Of course, he's done a few things along the way, like Hudson Yards and other projects. So he's made a fortune, but those affordable housing projects usually come with a 30-year term or more that the units have to remain deed restricted as affordable units. And there's no way to really profit from them, except after a certain period of time, you're allowed to refinance them. And if you refinance them at the current market, you may be able to pull some money out and then put that into another project or put that into your endowment fund or something to that effect. Because at that point, your revenue generated will exceed your existing debt obligations. So there is that potential. To address your concern, Mike, affordable housing is and has been a concern for both the federal government and the state government. State government, reluctantly, the 565 municipalities of the state have fought very significantly against the Fair Share Housing Mount Laurel decision, but it's now settled the law. It's been brought to the Supreme Court several times, and there is an obligation for municipalities in New Jersey to provide a portion of any housing as affordable. And the Mount Laurel decision has been, as I said, upheld in the Supreme Court several times. And they are now in a process where these decisions, or they call them rounds, we are now in the 3rd round of the Mount Laurel decision. So if New Providence had been sued, and I think they may have, they probably have a Fair Share Housing Center settlement agreement, which stipulates how many affordable housing units they have to provide. And the settlement agreement specifically indicates where they anticipate putting those affordable housing units. So the first thing we need to confirm is there a fair share settlement agreement with the town of New Providence? And two, if they have and they've created the locations for those required affordable units, how are they doing? Are they achieving what they need to achieve? And there will be a fourth round, and that'll be in 2025. So I was just at the League of Municipalities conference in Atlantic City last week, and I attended the affordable housing session. And remember, this is League of Municipalities. These are all local officials from throughout the state. And the big guidance that was given from the podium from consultants and specialists in the arena was, make sure you're satisfying your round 3 obligations and start preparing for your round 4 obligations. So in your situation, if there isn't, or if the units that have been identified in round 3 are moving forward, then to benefit it, you should look towards round 4 and advise the community that you're willing to do affordable housing on a portion of your site. And that will be helpful for a couple of reasons. Some of the financing is restricted to projects that have a settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center. And if I'm telling you something that you're aware of, or a term that you're not familiar with, like Fair Share Housing Center, I'll be happy to explain. They're the people that initiated the original Mount Laurel suit, which was the affordable housing suit back in the early 70s. And the basis of it was that parishioners in an AME church in Mount Laurel had been residents of Mount Laurel for generations upon generations. And the town of Mount Laurel, in its wisdom in the early 70s, decided that they wanted to restrict who could come into the community by requiring the zoning to be a 5-acre minimum zoning. Hence, these people that have been in there generations after generations couldn't afford to own 5 acres of land to build 1 unit of housing. And there were parishioners at the AME church, and several of them became the plaintiffs in this case, now known as the Mount Laurel decision. And they were successful in getting that decision. It's been tested in the Supreme Court several times. They've always won. And Fair Share Housing Center is really controlling right now the affordable housing litigation and legislation in the state of New Jersey. So item 1, find out where New Providence stands with its Mount Laurel obligation. That's one. As far as financing, there are a variety of programs, and I spoke to Daniel a little bit about some of them. I ran for 7 years the state of New Jersey's Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, which is the primary source of financing for affordable housing in the state of New Jersey. And it also controls the federal low-income housing tax credit program, which is perhaps the largest and without a doubt the most successful federal affordable housing program that's ever been initiated. And I believe the primary reason why it's so successful, it marries both the private sector and the public sector. Prior to LIHTC, which came about in 1986, low-income housing tax credit, the federal government, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, would assist in the production of, people refer to it as public housing. And public housing was 100% affordable, sometimes in towers, and unfortunately very poorly designed. And if you have a family with children and you're on the 18th floor and the playground is down on the ground level, it's very hard to keep an eye on your kids. and all kinds of problems ensued. And for the most part, those large public housing projects in New Brunswick and Newark, Elizabeth, and throughout the country have largely been taken down. And they came up with some other federal programs. Hope 6 is another one. But these are primarily federally funded projects. The tax credit program is an incentive program, and it incentivizes the private sector to come in and build affordable housing and get tax credits. Tax credits are, as they sound, a credit against federal income taxes, and it's a dollar for dollar reduction. So the federal government would allocate to each state a certain amount of low-income housing tax credits, and it's based on population. New Jersey gets about 25 or $26 million worth of tax credits each year from the federal government, and maybe a little bit higher now. And it sounds to me like not much, but
Right.
it's not just $25 million. It's 25 times 10 millions of dollars, because they give you 25 million a year for 10 years. And each year there's a new allocation. So it's the equivalent of $250 million a year. And
If you're a not-for-profit, can you sell those?
yes. And in fact, everybody sells them. Everybody sells them. Very few developers are in a position or want to be in a position to retain those tax credits. You have to have a major federal tax obligation to really benefit from that. So historically, the purchasers of those tax credits have been insurance companies and large banks, especially large banks, because they have a CRA requirement. That's Community Reinvestment Act, CRA credits, Community Reinvestment Act, which came about in, I believe, the 70s and required banks that were gaining their investments, their deposits from a region, not to use those deposits in other regions exclusively. They had to put a certain percentage of their assets that they obtained through a community back into that community. So the government requires that banks maintain a significant amount of investment in their regions, and these CRA credits are an obligation that the banks have to adhere to. So they will also get the dollar for dollar reduction against their federal tax obligation, but they'll also assist in meeting the requirements under the CRA legislation.
So when you
So
say
the LIHTC program is a great program, but let me assure you, it is a complicated program and very sophisticated and expensive to get into from the development side. And as a result, not many nonprofits participate, and the ones that do are very large or very sophisticated for some reason or another. There is a program called Project Freedom in New Jersey that is a nonprofit organization, and they've been quite successful in getting the LIHTC credits, the low-income housing tax credits. And those credits are very competitive. Each year, the agency will announce when they're going to go out with requests for proposals from the community of affordable housing developers. And they give them a deadline that their applications have to be in, and they have to conform to something known as the Qualified Allocation Plan, which is a criteria, a set of criteria. And you get points based on how close you are to meeting those criteria. And as I said, it's very competitive for that 25 times 10, $250 million credit. There are usually 3 or 4 applications for everyone that gets funded each year. Some projects will be in multiple years because the competition one year will be greater than another. Some have been in for a long time and never get funded. So, but the 9%, and there are 2 kinds of tax credits. the 9% tax credit and the 4% tax credit. The 9% is, as it would sound, a more significant subsidy because it's 9% of your eligible costs, which is, you know, a large percentage of the cost to develop a project, is given to you in the form of tax credits, 9% a year for 10 years. And there we are, again, at 90% of the equity. Now, you get these tax credits at the very beginning, or you get committed to get them in the very beginning, but you only receive them over a 10-year period. So what you're selling is the cash flow coming from the 9% credits over a 10-year period. And banks and insurance companies and other entities will buy them at a discount. So, pardon?
Up front, so it's.
Yes, up front. So if you're awarded, let's say $1 million worth of tax credits a year for 10 years, you can sell them today probably in the 85 cents range. So you're selling $1 of credit to someone that will get 10% of them each year for 10 years. So they'll discount it by giving you only 85 cents on the dollar. Now that changes depending on market conditions and a variety of reasons. While I was there, I saw them go from the high 80s to in excess of $1. So why would someone give you $1.10, for example, for a tax credit that's only going to give you $1 of credit against your federal tax liability? And the reason is you get other benefits. You, as the general partner or the limited partner, will get the pass-through of any losses, and there are losses and depreciation. So in addition to the dollar worth of tax credits, you'll get additional losses that you can also deduct from your federal tax obligations. And for banks, you also get the benefit of the CRA, Community Reinvestment Act provision. So there are reasons why it could exceed $1. Today, unfortunately, when the tax laws got changed under the previous administration, the Trump administration, and lower taxes at the corporate level, that reduced the incentive to buy the federal tax credits somewhat. So I saw the price of these tax credits drop from in the high 90s to the mid 80s at this point. But that's essentially how the tax credit program works. And then the 9%, you're getting 90% of your entitled costs. But because you're getting only 85 cents as opposed to $1 for that, it translates to roughly 70% of the equity needed to do a project. All right. So, but with 70% of the equity needed to do that project, you typically can get debt from a lender for the balance of that amount of money. And you may have some equity in it yourself. So that's the 9%. The 4% works the same way, except it's not competitive. You submit your application. If you meet the criteria, eventually you'll be awarded those 4% tax credits. But if you do the same calculations, it's 4% of the eligible cost times 10 years. That's 40% of the equity needed to do a project. Hence, you need 60% additional capital to go into your capital stack to make the project work. And that's where the problems arise. The original intent of the 4% was not to build new housing, but to renovate existing affordable housing. Hence, you've already got your building in place. You're doing renovations. You're doing $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 a unit in renovations, and you have cash flow from day one, so you can accommodate that. The only time 4% tax credits work for new construction is when you can find additional subsidy dollars, and that appears periodically. When I was running HMFA, the Sandy situation, the Hurricane, Superstorm Sandy, whatever, the federal government threw $4 billion at New Jersey, and a major chunk of it was allotted for $700 million was allotted towards affordable housing. So we were able to work with developers and give them 4% tax credits along with some subsidy from the Sandy program. And we could get them to roughly the same position as a 9% credit, which would be 70% of the equity for a deal. And we could build new affordable housing using 4% credits and this other source of funding. So that's LIHTC. And as I said, it's a very complicated project. And I mentioned to Dan that agency typically would not consider an application from an organization like your church, only because you haven't done this before. And it's so complicated, they wouldn't award it directly to you. However, if you partnered with another developer, either profit or nonprofit developer, and structured a deal that worked for both of you, then you could be participating in a 9% or 4% deal using LIHTC. But recently, since over 300 towns have reached settlements with the Fair Share Housing Center, and many of these are suburban communities that have a relatively, they're small communities and they have small obligation. The state has come up with a few programs utilizing the, believe it or not, the COVID money, the pandemic money, to support that. So I mentioned to Daniel that there was a program that if you were to develop 25 units or less, you could get, this is outside the scope of federal LIHTC, you could get up to $250,000 per unit. And the complications are much fewer. It's not as costly a program because doing tax credits, they have to sell tax exempt bonds for 4%. You got to get bond counsel. There's a lot of complication. This one's pretty straightforward. You meet their criteria, they'll give you up to $250,000 a unit to develop an affordable unit. I'm familiar with the program because I am in the process of developing a 25-unit apartment building in Rivervale, New Jersey, up in Bergen County, near the New York border. And if all goes well, we'll close before the end of the year on this project. And it's gone pretty well so far. And I'm a developer in a sense that I have a partner, and they and I have applied for this program together. This is a program, again, that is earmarked primarily for settlement projects. The town.
What is that?
Pardon?
What does settlement projects mean?
A court settlement project.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning that Fair Share Housing has sued the community, they've entered into a settlement agreement, and they have an obligation. And how I became aware of it, the courts don't understand affordable housing and planning issues to the degree necessary. So they typically hire what they call a court master. And they're a consultant that knows affordable housing and will guide the judge in the technical issues related to the development of affordable housing. One of my dear friends is a court master. A lot of my friends are court masters. And she was the court master related to the Rivervale project. And they had gone out with an RFP to find a developer to develop this small 25-unit project that they had agreed to do in their court settlement. And nobody responded to the request for proposals. So she called me and asked if I would assist the town in finding a developer or looking at their RFP to see if I could help them rewrite it so that it might be more attractive. But the reason they really didn't get any interest was that it was a very small project. And it came out, their RFP came out just about the same time as this 25-unit project funding program came out. And most people were unaware of it. I had just read some stories about it. So it piqued my interest, and I spoke to the town. I met with the town administrator, the attorney that represented the town in their settlement. and they showed me the property. And I gave them some suggestions on what I would do to fix up their QAP. This was all gratis. I wasn't charging them anything. But I like the site, and I've been doing real estate development for 25 years before I went to the state and ran the housing and mortgage finance program. So it looked like good real estate to me, and I was aware that this 25-unit program, it's called the Affordable Housing Trust Fund program, was out there, and I thought it might fit the requirements. So I did a little research, and then found a developer that I would partner with that had a construction concern associated with, and we responded to the RFP, and we were the ones selected. There were two others this time that also competed, but we were the ones that were selected, and we gave them, I guess, the best price because it's a two-phase project. The front phase is 25 units of affordable, 100% affordable. Every unit is affordable. And then the back parcel of land had an obligation to do 12 units affordable. They perceived it to be townhome product, and there was a potential to do another total 35, of which 12 would be affordable. So those remaining 23 units could be market rate. And Rivervale is a very attractive community. The site was located next to a golf course. We thought we could sell those units for a pretty good price. And we agreed to pay $1.4 million on that project. So between our offer on the project and the fact that both of us had, my partner and I had a lot of experience in either private sector development or affordable development, because my partner had done a lot of smaller projects about that scale. And we won the project. We got our land use approvals. We're hoping to close with our bank, as I said, in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a simultaneous closing with the state. And the state will give us the $250 per unit, which is roughly $6 million, but it comes down as we're drawing and developing the project. There's no money thrown up front from the state government, but we are getting money from the town. They are putting $500,000 as part of their obligation on the first phase, nothing on the second phase. So that program, I think, could probably be the first one that I would suggest you consider if you were going to go forward with an affordable housing project. And that's called the Affordable Housing Trust Fund program. So Daniel and I spoke about the scale of the project. As I said, I looked at not only the written report that was done, but also the conceptual plan. And I favored one or the other. I forget which one it was at this point, but there was one that I think I told you, Dan, that I thought was a better project.
And the mix of low-income housing and market.
Yeah. I think in your case, to meet both of your goals, one is a more immediate one, getting some cash flow sooner than later, because if it's 100% affordable, you'll be able to make your payments, but there's going to be very, very little left over at the end of the day. Whereas you could do the affordables mixed, carry those and rent full market if it's a rental project on the balance. And if you want to retain control, I would say do a rental on the project. And that could be rental of either apartment flats or townhome design kind of product. So, there's a variety of product out there that could work. And if you were to keep the scale in the range of 25 units, you could get 250 a unit as your capital towards it. That still may not be enough. Market costs of construction today are, off the charts, especially after the pandemic and the difficulty in getting some of the product you needed. Lumber went very high for a period of time. So those are issues that you never know what's going to happen. You can use your best judgment to guess it, what it'll be, but something from left field like the pandemic can come in and create all kinds of problems. And in fact, the state government used some of that pandemic money as gap fillers. When the projects were approved, in some cases, they were anticipating the current costs that they were at the time. And as the costs rapidly grew, they became no longer financially viable to go forward with. And now the state government is coming in using some of the COVID dollars to fill that gap, to get those projects up and going. Why don't I stop here and let you ask any questions you might have? That's a lot of information to get all at one sitting.
A couple of things. One, I was talking to someone else, and basically, if you're, they said if you're waiting for the perfect timing for construction costs and mortgage rates and everything, you could wait forever. You're never going to get the perfect environment.
Absolutely true.
In every way. But you had mentioned when we talked one time before about some low interest loans as low as 1%, and some programs where that you pay back based on the cash flow. Or
well, that's this program, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund program.
Okay.
The 250 is technically a loan. Technically a loan, and the interest rate is 1%, and you're only obligated to pay 50% of your net operating income. So by the time you get to that, you're not generating a lot of money, and you can keep half of it, and the rest of it has to go towards your loan payment. But especially in a nonprofit scenario, that loan would probably be ultimately waived, and it would be a grant to you for the project. In fact, this is the state telling us that they're probably going to convert it to ours to a grant, even though we're a for-profit entity.
And so at the
go ahead, Mike.
So there's a mix of lenders then on your project. You've got what is technically being called a loan from the trust fund for certain units, and then you have let's say,
I have essentially two projects. The 25 unit is an apartment building, and that's a project. The second phase of the overall project is viewed as a completely separate project. I will not be able to get the 250,000 unit because it's a mixed project, and they'll view it as inclusionary, meaning I'm going to benefit from those market rate units. So I will not be eligible to get the 250,000 unit there. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have to get most of the financing through private lending, the bank. We're using M&T Bank for the construction loan. I'm sorry, Provident Bank for the construction loan on the 25 unit project that we're going forward with. So, and we'll be able to draw money down there after we've pulled down all of the state money. So it's a combination of factors. And if all goes well, we'll be able to draw additional dollars down based on our credit standing to come up with the down payment for phase 2, which is that $1.4 million that I mentioned to you.
It's you're talking about financing, and I don't know how this works, but actually Trinity, who is helping us with our pre-development, they actually said they had somebody to help finance ours in mind for us.
Really?
They've worked with before. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of Enterprise Community Partners?
Yes.
Okay. I guess
They're big time. Yes, they're a well-known organization doing affordable housing throughout the country. So yes.
Yeah, Trinity gives them a lot of money, and I think Trinity kind of puts their thumb on the scales in some cases.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
So you have heard of them. Okay.
Yes.
I was wondering about that. So
that's great. I mean, Enterprise would be great asset to have.
Yeah, they said they would like to make the introduction, us to them, to us to them. in the near future. So okay. So it sounds like the Affordable Housing Trust would be something that would probably work for us. But are you suggesting, are you saying that if it's not 100% affordable, that so if we throw market rate in there, that they're less inclined to give you full amounts for that?
No, it's this thing that they call inclusionary. They will consider a nonprofit mixing income in the project. But we would have to go through what they call an inclusionary test. And there's a whole process required by the state on that. And that probably that process costs, let's say, $15,000 to undertake. And 99% of the time, it's shown that even with market rate units, the cost of the affordables exceed that which can be supported with the market rate. And again, it depends on how much is affordable, how much is market in your mix. So there's going to be some analysis that we would have to do to find the right point that makes the most sense. Or, you could do, if depending on the property, you could subdivide the property, make one piece, the affordable piece, and do workforce housing on the other. And that's a term of art that's being used. Affordable is considered anything that is affordable to people paying 30% of their income, and the rents are below 80% of the market rents. So that would be considered affordable. And in these court settlements, Fair Share Housing has pushed that further to say that 13% of the units have to be very low income, meaning affordable to people earning 30% of the median income for that area, and no more than 30% or something to that order of magnitude in the above 50%. So between 50 and 30 is considered moderate income. Between 50 and 80 is considered affordable, but higher end of affordable. It's as I said, this is a complicated, ever evolving process. And workforce housing is considered 80% of median to 120% of median income, affordable to people in that range. So, we have to do an analysis to determine how best to structure the deal and get the most subsidies for it as possible.
Okay, so that answers my question. So we would probably look at doing an affordable project and then breaking off a separate project, maybe looking at financing a complete different way for some work.
It could be a market rate project. I mean, it could be a two-phase. You start with the affordable to get the infrastructure in place, and you built your affordable unit. And then a year later, you go forward with a land use approval from New Providence to build a market rate project. Again, we'd have to look at the site and have a better sense of what we're trying to accomplish to refine the discussion to maximize the benefits.
Right. Okay. All right. I only have one more question, but I wanted to see if Mike or Jackie have any further questions or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, just very broadly, we obviously have this sort of really wide open, possibilities with the site, and we are learning as we go.
Oh yeah.
In terms of having a partner, when I say a partner, I don't necessarily mean an equity partner. What would you recommend for us in terms of the first sort of professional that we get, as a part of our inner circle? Is that an attorney? Is that a development advisor? Because, to Daniel's point earlier, there's real steps coming up here, right? Like with Trinity Church, and they're going to visit the site, and then they're going to potentially help us.
Well, I would keep Trinity Church happy, and I would first meet with I would meet with Enterprise, and you might be able to work out a deal with them where they could come in and provide virtually all your support services necessary and guide you through this process. You probably still need a local attorney. There may be a role for a consultant like me that works with these state agencies on a day-to-day basis. Enterprise may not do that, but they work on these types of projects throughout the country. So they have a pretty good grasp. There's no question that they understand the LIHTC program very well. But even a LIHTC program in one state versus another state could differ dramatically, because this qualified allocation plan, the QAP, is the state criteria to conform to utilizing the federal low-income housing tax credits. And New Jersey's could be one way, Pennsylvania's could be very different. They could emphasize more rural development, whereas in New Jersey, it's going to be suburban and urban development, less so in rural areas. And, there's most states don't have a Mount Laurel decision to contend with. So everyone's going to be pretty unique. And so having someone on the ground that understands land use for affordable housing, and I could give you a few names that you could consider. And two, someone that understands the ways of the world when it comes to New Jersey programs. For example, Enterprise may or may not know or understand this Affordable Housing Trust program very well, because it's only been around for a year and a half. And right now they have sufficient amount of money and getting more. So it's a good time for that particular program.
Yeah.
Daniel,
Sorry, go ahead, Jackie.
No, I have just a question about the town of New Providence. I know, Daniel, I think you said you spoke to some of the mayor or whatever in New Providence, but how much in advance or how much communication do we as a church have to tell the town that this is what we're thinking? Because because they're already working on affordable housing on South Street.
Well, but the way ours would be sequenced, as I understand it, and this is talking to Keith Lynch, who's the zoning officer. So everything that they've got in the works right now has already met many of the approvals. What do they call it? The
round 3 criteria.
Well, and so they would be looking at us at the one coming up.
Right.
So
2024. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
right. So
it'll probably be in 2025, but
25.
everybody should be getting in gear now.
Right.
But this is where, in the feasibility study, it said that we should go ahead and get all of our entitlements lined up. So basically,
and the entitlements are the land use approvals from planning boards, zoning boards,
Right.
what have you.
right.
And the first professional besides the attorney, I would urge you to find an engineer that is well regarded in the town of New Providence, because he'll know how to design the project to meet the local criteria. So if you have a civil engineering group that you're familiar with, or ask around to see who would be helpful in that regard, that would be another professional that I would put at the top of the list or near the top of the list.
So what Trinity is saying to me, and is that our next step would probably be to put out RFPs for a advisor consultant to come along with us to basically sequence the next steps for us.
Mm-hmm.
So going to the town, bringing in an attorney, doing cash flow analysis, and all looking at which projects. We're a long time, we're a year and a half, 2 years from a shovel in the ground for anything.
Yeah.
Would that be?
That would be on the aggressive side.
Okay, so maybe 3 to 4 years.
I'd say 2 to 3 years. Okay.
Before we get there, because we do have to do all those entitlements. So Jackie, that's politically speaking. Not only have I talked to Keith Lynch, the zoning development officer, but I also last night, because I don't want him to hear about it otherwise, I pulled the mayor aside and I said, I don't want you to be blindsided by this.
Good.
Something we're thinking about, we're exploring, we've done a feasibility study.
What was his comment?
He said, and I said, I don't want you to get hit politically. He said, oh, if it's the right thing to do, I don't want to get hit politically. He said, don't you lose your school though, because his grandson goes there. He loves his school. I said, no. I said, we want to give them more space because the other thing that we know is we need more childcare in New Providence. And he said, that's a good idea. So I think as long as we're offering, more childcare, as well as responding to the Mount Laurel mandate.
That's pretty good leverage.
I think they will look favorably on us. And what I'm hoping is that they would approve us. I mean, the feasibility study, I think it talked about something like 42 units. I would love to see them come in and say, 2015 or 2515, affordable versus some market rate, so that that we can split it that way. Plus, the zoning officer, there are 3 properties that adjoin ours, and if it were not for those properties, we would be contiguous with a zone that is already zoned for multiple housing. What do you?
Multifamily housing.
Multifamily housing. So we have a small slither that's contiguous with them, but he even suggested, look, if you can pick up those 3 houses, I have $1 million I can give you toward the project.
Wow.
And so I think the town is going to be pretty favorable, knowing that we're looking at the next cycle of doing this. And I think to begin to bring them into the loop a little bit so that they know what we're planning, so that they're not surprised by this or anything, I think is politically the way to go.
Now, tell me about, when I'm up there, I may want to drive by that site specifically to see those 3 units, because, the town could grant you a use variance and extend the zone into your property if they choose, okay? Acquiring the remaining lots, that's wonderful if you can pull it off. And if you're going to get $1 million from somebody to do that, it'll go a long way. But I don't think $1 million will be sufficient, depending on what those 3 lots look like, to acquire.
No.
Knowing New Providence, I would doubt that, maybe that could be half of the cost, maybe less than the cost.
Yeah.
So,
what I would hope the town would say, this would be, the variance would be, as we're able, we will acquire those.
right.
And look at doing, maybe even expanding more, if we make that commitment to them.
Right.
I've heard this.
Let me also tell you, Michael and Jackie, I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey. I have an MBA and a master's degree in city and regional planning, all from Rutgers. So I'm a local kid. Grew up in New Brunswick, so I could walk to Rutgers. So it was the easiest place to go. But I've been involved in this. My undergraduate degree is in urban planning and geography, a joint degree. So my background is in this, and I've been before, I want to say literally hundreds of planning and zoning boards in my 40+ year career. So yeah, I would urge you to get a good land use lawyer. That's probably number 1, to give you some guidance on what the procedures will be. Number 2, get a good civil engineer to work with you, and get somebody that understands development. And depending on what enterprise has, as far as capacity, they may have some of that available to you. They may know an attorney in New Jersey that they worked with before. There are a lot of things that they can bring to the table. So again, let's not ignore Trinity's support on this and work with them.
You're familiar with Trinity Wall Street? I'm assuming you worked in the city. You probably know that.
I know where the church is. I've walked on its grounds on several occasions. It's an amazing, and I've also seen the movie. So
yeah, a lot of the high rises in Lower Manhattan are on Trinity property. They are.
Is that right?
They sold the air rights or leased the air rights or either
Right.
own the property underneath outright. So yeah.
Yeah, New York is a very unique environment. Developing there takes a couple of extra doses of financial courage, let's put it that way.
Well,
and
that-
and the zoning there is very unique. I mean, air rights only exist in places like Manhattan. So.
Yeah. Actually, that's how Trinity is able to afford making grants to places like us, is because, I mean,
They've
have
got good cash flow.
exactly. I want to honor our time. I don't want to keep you any longer. I have two other questions. I hear you saying this is doable. It's a lot of work, but it's doable.
Yes.
And it would be.
And you know why it's doable? You own the land already.
Right. In fact, the bishop is coming out we have a new bishop. So the bishop is coming next week to actually tour the property so that they'll have a better idea of what we're talking about. They've already seen the feasibility study and everything. So it's doable. That's what I hear you saying, and that it could be profitable for us long term if we structure everything correctly.
Yeah. If you want a quick turnaround, this ain't the way to do it.
Right. My second
But it's a
question.
mission. I mean, it's really a mission
Right.
thing as well.
Right.
So to that, let me just follow up the
Sure.
answer to that question. I just look at the feasibility study, which is somebody that really sat down and tried to pencil out what
Right.
this looks like. And you wouldn't look at that presentation and say it's something that anyone would do, right? The value gap is so significant. But you think through these various incentives, and again, a mix of low-income housing and market, it's enough to bridge that gap.
So, for example, the project I'm doing in Rivervale, it's going to cost us about $8.5 million to build that 25-unit apartment building. We're going to get $6 million in 1% money from the state that may be converted to a grant. That's great. Now, I can't pull the money out of that thing for a long time because I'm going to be required to deed restrict this project for at least 30 years. And they're talking about raising it to 35 or 40. So it's not really going to benefit me in the short run. I'll get my money out, I hope, through the construction management fees, the developer fees, and some of these other fees that we earn along the way. But once it's operational, it's not going to throw off a lot of cash. So my son, who also has his MBA and is in the real estate business, will have the benefit of that going forward. And phase two, I might see some money because if the market continues to go up, the minimum number that is going out for a market rate townhouse in Rivervale is $750,000. It's a smaller market because of interest rates right now, but I think that's a few years down the road too. So I suspect that will change at some point. Interest rates will come back down, maybe not to where they were in 2-3%, but they're going to. And there's a tremendous housing demand out there. And the reason why it isn't going right now is because interest rates are kind of high. So once they equalize, or the market demand and the interest rates get to some equilibrium, then I think you're going to see the market take off again. So, these people have made a fortune in real estate. I just want to make a little bit, so I don't have to worry about retirement going forward.
My second question is, so when it's time to put out an RFP for a consultant or advisor, is this something that you would be interested in?
The first thing I think you need to is meet with enterprise and see what they can provide before we do, or you do, any kind of solicitation of it. And I'm not so sure you need to do an RFP. What I think you need to do is do some research on land use attorneys, because I think that's one of your early obligations. And as I said, an enterprise may have some names to throw at you, and then go forward. And as far as an RFP,
Trinity has said that's what they want us to do.
okay, well then you got to do an RFP.
Yes. Yeah.
And then essentially what you're going to do is you're going to outline the requirements that you're looking for, and then distribute it to half a dozen consultants in those particular arenas, and you could get references on that, and then see what they come up with. But I've been on both ends of RFPs. Sometimes you get the wrong person coming in with the RFP. When I was at the agency, we had this boondoggle of a project that had laid fallow for 10 years and was a major distressed asset in our portfolio that had been approved long before I got there and had been there for 10 years. And the choice given to me initially was cut and run, or try to work out the problems. And in my mind, cutting and running, selling and walking out, put a black eye in the agency, because we're going to lose $35–40 million in that process, with no chance of recovery. We would get a lot less. And this was a 330 unit project called Whitlock Mills in Jersey City, and it was aging on the vine for a decade, to the degree that the kitchen cabinets no longer were considered new, even though they've never been used. And we did an RFP to conform with what the state requirements are. And unfortunately, one of the developers came in, several of them came in. I thought that this project was over their heads. The scale of it, the complexity associated with it was over. So we narrowed it down, and I gave the top three a chance to revise their proposals. And I insisted that eventually I want to get my money back. And as you can imagine, over a decade, costs had gone up dramatically. And the project had been done by a developer that didn't know one end of a hammer from the other, but he knew financing very well, and LIHTC very well. And he hired the wrong contractor that did terrible work, and a good chunk of it had to be redone. But I went through the process, but I knew who I wanted to take over this project, because I was confident. I had seen him do great work in others. So I said, I want to improve. So we reviewed it. But when you do an RFP, there's typically a paragraph in there that says, we can choose whoever we want, regardless of what the responses are to this RFP. And I would encourage you to do that, because sometimes the wrong people respond to the RFP. And I'm glad to say that, although it was the bane of my 7 years of being the executive there, before I left, we settled on it and closed the deal, and the contractor started doing it, and it's fully occupied now. And we'll get our money back. Unfortunately, it's going to be over the life of the loan, but eventually we'll break even on that deal. But it's sure better than losing $35 or $40 million. So so we'll do the RFP, but make sure you have flexibility to make the decision that's the right decision.
But RFP, in this case, RFP for what? Like a development?
Well, what I believe Dan is asking for is an RFP for professionals, engineers, architects.
Well,
land use attorneys.
That goes back to my earlier questions. Who's the first person? And maybe it's not. Maybe it is a group of people that you're evaluating all at the same time. Or is there one professional, be it the attorney or a development manager, that's your first step? That's maybe.
I think you have to put together your team.
So Trinity is saying that they want us to have a real estate consultant or a development advisor who then will assemble their own team of engineers, attorneys, CPAs. It might be a consultant who already has these people on staff.
So in my situation, I have a relationship with an individual named Martin Bernstein, and I got to know him when I was at the agency. And he had, long before I was there, been the director of the LIHTC program at the agency back in the late 80s. LIHTC only came about in the mid 80s, and he was there in the late 80s and 90s, and then left and did private consulting. The very big development companies that focus in on affordable housing have in-house everybody, but they're going to want the deal. they're going to pay you for the land, and they're going to want the deal. But this is a small deal, so it's going to be. And those developers that are not that big use consultants like Marty Bernstein to do the actual financial numbers and prepare the applications. And Marty's both an attorney and a CPA. So we don't represent a development as far as land use approvals, but we will represent a project going to state or federal financing programs and put together documentation and run the numbers and make sure that the numbers are the way they're supposed to be and put together the applications. But we don't have a land use attorney on staff. We could recommend half a dozen. And construction companies, you absolutely should get prices from different construction companies. So because some are looking for work, some are not looking for work, you'll get a good number for one and not such a good number for another.
This has been very helpful for me. I've got a page full of notes, and
Okay.
I've recorded this so that what I couldn't jot down, I can go back and listen to, and I'll share it with the rest of our leadership at St. Andrews as well. Well,
I wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and I'm going to take a quick run around your church when I go to the Sharon Network holiday event at the end of this month. It's the 30th, I believe.
It's when, the 30th?
I believe so. Hold on.
I might not. I was going to say I would meet you there and give you the nickel tour. I can't that later in the day. I could earlier in the day. So.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility. Hold on.
That's actually the day that the bishop will be coming to do the tour between 11:30 and or between 11 and noon.
Hold on. Maybe it's not. I will text you the date so that you have it.
Okay. All right.
Right.
And if you're around, would love to show you.
Okay.
Because we actually own a lot, not only the lot that the church is on, but we own a lot that's adjacent to it.
Well, I'm going to relook at the feasibility analysis that was done before I come out there, so I have a better sense of it.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I read it right after you sent it.
Yeah.
So a few things have happened since then. So
well, thank you very much for all your time.
not a problem.
Evening. You've answered so many questions. It's been so very helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks so
much.
much. It was great.
You're very welcome.
you.
Have a good
Happy
holiday.
Thanksgiving.
Take
Happy
care.
Thanksgiving. Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.